Hey everyone, Ryan here. Today I'm going to be doing a review roundup, and this is going to be some Oscar movies that have been nominated for this year. I'm going to be doing 4 of them. Now this first one, it really only got nominated for one particular category, but I was like, I'll include it in here. So the first movie that I am going to talk about is Better Man, which was directed by Michael Gracie, which I've never seen any of his previous works. He has done The Greatest Showman, and I did see that he's doing the upcoming Tangled live action movie, which I didn't know they were actually doing, so that's very interesting. Now, Better Man, it follows Robbie Williams. He is a musician. And honestly, I've heard of the name before, but personally, I didn't know any of his songs. I can't name any of them. He's not popular in the US whatsoever, which probably really goes in the fact of why this movie didn't really do well in the US. And then he's mainly known for in the UK, I would say. So this movie didn't do very well at the box office. Even in the UK, it didn't do that well. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it's because it's presented that he is an ape, which I'll be honest, when I saw the trailer, I was very turned off by that. I was like, why is he an ape? Like, is this like another Planet of the Apes movie? Actually, the commercial for this came up and my wife said, is it another Planet of the Apes movie that's coming out? I'm like, no. It's the Robbie Williams movie. And she's like, who? Robin Williams? So I do think a lot of Americans don't know who Robbie Williams is. I can tell you straight off, firsthand, he's not on the radio here. I've never heard any songs of him on the radio. I think maybe I've seen him like maybe on an award show maybe once. That's all I really know about him, especially going into this movie. Now, I will say this. The ape thing, it seemed like it was going to be a distraction, but as the movie just went along, it really wasn't a distraction anymore. He presents himself as different in this movie, and nobody else actually brings up the fact that he is an ape in this movie. Now, it goes from his young childhood to him going to this boy band called Take That, which I've never heard of, so that was cool to really, get that kind of understanding of where he actually started from. Then it goes to his fame as a solo artist, and then also his downfalls of like him being successful, him having his anxiety, his drug addiction, things like that. Kind of like the typical kind of thing that you would see in a biopic movie. But I do think this is one of those movies that is different because it presents himself as an ape. That was something really different that they presented, which I can really appreciate about the movie, being different in that aspect and telling it in that perspective. Now, I will say this is a better biopic than, say, like a movie like Bob Marley, for instance. I don't think that's a movie that really gives you a lot of information about him. Versus this movie, it gives you a little bit more. I feel like you're a little bit more into his character. Yeah, he's an ape here, but I do think, despite the fact of that, I do think that you learn a little bit more about his character, getting into his head as to like his anxiety and the fact that he is famous. A lot of times we don't really know like what these celebrities and musicians actually go through. So we get a little bit inside his head as to what he's actually going through. And I really appreciated that about the movie. Now, it's not a movie that I would watch over and over again, but I do have appreciation for how it's shot. The actual progression of like the ape here, going from like a young ape to an older ape, and just seeing him really go through his life struggles, his success, his failures. I really enjoyed that. Now, as far as like a score for this movie, I would give it like a 3 out of 5. I think it's one of those movies that I did like, but it's not a movie where I'm like, yeah, I gotta revisit this time and time again. I appreciated certain little things that they put in the story. I do think that they maybe skipped over a little bit of things in the story, which again, like with biopic films, it's very hard to get like every little thing that you want to get throughout like the life of somebody. And then the fact that they have some type of say, obviously, in their biopic, sometimes they don't want like all the negative things that maybe has affected their career or just certain things. But I do think in this, it tries to balance out the good, the bad, the ugly, and then like the in-between. So on that front, I could say that this is a movie that I would say to go check out at least once and enjoy it for what it is. But it's not a movie where I'm going to go check out this guy's music, because I don't love his music by any means. But I think the music, it worked for this particular film. So 3 out of 5 is what I would give this. The next movie that I checked out was The Brutalist. Now, I was really reluctant to check this movie out, mainly because it's 3 hours and 21 minutes. The biggest thing is trying to find time to watch this movie, mainly because, like, in the theater, with the fact that it's 3.5 hours, plus previews, plus driving back and forth, that takes a big chunk out of your day. And a lot of times they would play this movie at like 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's just too late to go check out a movie like this of this caliber, especially during the week, because a lot of times I go check out movies after work, and I'm sorry, but getting home at midnight and then getting up early the next day, it just doesn't work. So I could never really find a time to go check this out at theater, so I watched it at home one evening with plenty of time to spare. Now, this film was directed by Brady Corbett, which I've never seen any of his previous works. It stars Adrian Brody, Felicity Jones, and Guy Pearce, and it's about a character named Laszlo who migrates from Europe after post-war times, and he goes to start a new life in Pennsylvania. His wife, played by Felicity Jones, and niece are stuck in Europe, and there's different reasons as to why that actually is. But this movie, it really focuses on Laszlo going to Pennsylvania and starting a new life in America. He's an architect, and he comes across a lot of challenges that he has to face to really get his work out there and get his name out there. This film, the sound is really good, the acting is really good, the score is really good, and it's a very good story. It's very well-rounded. The only negative I would say about this movie is there's certain points where it slows down a little bit, and there's one certain scene with Guy Pearce's character in the third act where I was like, did we really need this? I understood like the character as to why he did that, but I was like, yeah, did we really need that? And then certain things they did with his character in the third act, I was like, okay, so that's it with his character there? That's it? Those will be on the negative side. From a positive standpoint, I did like to watch Laszlo's character actually grow, and then when his wife actually comes into the picture with his niece into the United States, which there's certain parameters as to why that actually is, but Laszlo, he starts to really function a little bit more as a human being, because you really see his struggles in the beginning, especially within the first half of this movie, trying to build and design architecture and get that type of recognition, because he has this one guy that hires him to do a library in which this guy just like freaks out on him and pretty much is just like, yeah, like, I don't want this library. And then later on hires him because he sees that his work is really good. And then it's kind of like a back and forth type of thing, and certain struggles, ups and downs that you're seeing within his character. But I thought it was a very well-rounded story. I really did like the character development. I think like all the acting is really good here. Felicity Jones is very good. Adrian Brody is excellent in this movie. And I really hope this film gets some awards because I really enjoyed this. As far as a score, I would give it a 4.5 out of 5. Like I said, like little certain points in the movie where it's just a little bit slow, and then certain things in the third act I wasn't like crazy about. But I think overall it's a very well-rounded story and something that you definitely have to watch. I actually pre-ordered the 4K copy from the A24 shop because I definitely want to watch this movie again. And like I said, I hope it wins some awards. So definitely check this movie out. Next movie that I checked out is A Complete Unknown. Now, this is another movie that I was very reluctant to watch as well, mainly because I'm not the biggest fan of Timothée Chalamet. Also in here is Dan Fogler, Ella Fanning, and Edward Norton. So pretty good cast, I would say, overall. Bob Dylan, I wouldn't say like I know a lot about him. I mean, there's a few songs that I knew of him, and that's pretty much it going into this movie. Now, it follows Timothée Chalamet's character, Bob Dylan, in which he is 19 years old. He's arriving in New York. He's fresh, kind of on the scene, trying to make a name for himself, and he has an acoustic guitar, and he plays music. And you're following his journey to becoming this hit sensation, as we know today, as Bob Dylan. Now, actually, I didn't even know that Bob Dylan was actually still alive. He's in his 80s now. Didn't know that whatsoever. I didn't know that he had over like 40, I think it's 40 albums he's done. That is crazy for any artist. And I would say like some of his music, I would say like some of his hits aren't too bad. I wouldn't say like I love his kind of music, but I could say like if I was in the right mood, I could probably listen to it. And with this movie, I'll say this. I think Timothée Chalamet, I think he has the look down for Bob Dylan. I think from a perspective of like trying to be Bob Dylan, I think that he does a pretty good job with the character himself. My biggest problem with this movie is just how they really portray Bob Dylan, because from what I understand, he's somebody that not a lot of people really know a lot about, but this movie doesn't really do any favors to really telling you what he's about. Now, what I will say that I liked about this movie, so in the beginning, when he's struggling and he's playing different clubs and he's trying to make a name for himself, I believe he did his first album and it was some covers and it didn't do well, so it failed. So, seeing that aspect, I liked when he makes an album and then he starts to become famous. You see him be successful. You see these like girls chasing him and he starts to become famous. I enjoyed that aspect. I enjoyed him actually performing, and he plays in some festivals as well. We get a little bit of romance, I guess, between him and Ella Fanning. I would say it's like super mild. Like any of his romantic encounters seem pretty mild. And just the drama between him and Ella Fanning, I felt was very mild. This movie overall felt very mild to me because from what I understand, he is a big drug user. He likes to smoke weed, and apparently he does heroin. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not really sure. So on that aspect, this movie doesn't really show the downfalls and him using drugs. It seems like a very safe movie to me. It felt kind of more family friendly. And I don't know if like Bob Dylan, like that's how he wanted himself portrayed on screen. But I just felt like this movie, it was a big musical. So like if you loved his music, you got plenty of that. But if you're looking for like an actual story as far as like really getting to know Bob Dylan, I just don't really feel this movie in 2 hours and about 15 minutes that it really does that. You get plenty of music, like I said, you get that mild drama, but there's not really anything else to really digest with this film. It's just a lot of music, like song after song after song. And I was like, is there any events that we can really get to know him by, or certain things that we really feel like could be important to his career? And I felt like this movie, it just didn't really offer that. I felt like I said, there's a mild drama with him and Ella Fanning. There's some other musician that he has like a little bit of a romantic affair with, which, you know, we see a little bit with her. And then there's some other woman I think that likes him as well in this. But other than that, like, I just don't feel like I really know him as a person whatsoever after this film. I just didn't think the film was structured very well. I felt like, I mean, if you love the music and love like a musical, you're going to love this. But if you're looking for something where it's really going to get you like actually knowing who Bob Dylan was and just sharing like different events in his life, I don't think it really gives it to you. It's definitely a small sample of his life. And I did read after watching this that he was married twice and he has children. They don't go into any of that here. It's just when he's very young. I believe it's only like maybe a few years tops in this movie, but not really a whole lot. So I was very disappointed with this movie overall. As far as a score for it, I would give it 2 out of 5. It wasn't really for me. I just felt like it wasn't written well. I mean, acting, it was fine. And like the music is fine, but like there's just like too much music after a while and just not enough story to really knowing this guy. Like I still feel like I gotta go search on the internet, like who is Bob Dylan? That's how I felt after watching this. So 2 out of 5 is all I can give it. The fourth and final movie that I checked out is a film called Nickel Boys. Now this film was directed by Ramel Ross, which I've never seen any of his previous works. It stars Ethan Harris and Brandon Wilson, which I don't think I've seen either of those two in any movies to my knowledge. Now, what is Nickel Boys actually about? Well, it's about this boy named Elwood who actually gets accepted into this pretty decent college. He's hitchhiking to college one day, and this man picks him up in a vehicle, and apparently he has actually stolen this vehicle, and he is an accomplice to this guy, and he gets sent off to reform school. Now, this takes place in the 1960s, so there is a lot of racism, and segregation within this film. Now, it's filmed from a first-person point of view. Actually, I'm not sure what you actually call it, but the bars are actually cut off like on the sides, so it's just like a small little square that you're watching this movie in that type of point of view perspective. And I'll say this actually is a true story, and the school that Elwood actually went to, it is in Florida, actually. So with this movie, I will say this is a very powerful movie. It definitely shows the struggles of Elwood and this boy named Turner, their friendship. It's interesting because in the first person point of view, it's just showing like all the action and certain things that are unfolding. But then there's certain aspects where they actually show Elwood on camera and Turner as well, and they show them bonding. And also it shows you within the school like how the whites are getting treated better than the blacks, obviously, and there's certain things that are going on that should not be going on, and unfortunately they are. There is Martin Luther King in this movie, in which you see Elwood and Turner really look up to him because he's obviously very motivating and wanting to bring people together. So you see that aspect. On the flip side, I would say that this movie, it's kind of slow, and I could understand why somebody wouldn't like this movie, mainly because it does have some events in the film, don't get me wrong, but at times it can feel a little bit meandering and a little bit uneventful. But at the same time, this is a powerful film, like I said. Like, it definitely has some events in this film that just leave you going, that's ridiculous that these boys had to go through this. And even just, like, certain things that are really going on between, like, the teachers, how they actually are showing these boys going through these certain situations. Like, they literally have this room, and it reminded me of, like, Matilda with, like, the chokey, but they call it a sweat box. And I was just thinking to myself, because obviously I live in Florida, imagine being thrown in the sweat box and sitting there and it's like a 95-degree day and then like the heat index. I can't imagine what these boys went through. And this film, it's one of those films that it has a lot of tragedy in it. There's definitely things in here that make you just go, like, I hope we never get to that point again. Like, I hope we are not on this path to having people be treated like this, because there's no reason that blacks during this time need to be treated this way. So I think on that aspect, it is a powerful movie. However, I will say at times it did challenge me quite a bit in its pacing. And I think that's why I can't say that I fully love the movie. But again, this is a movie that does have a powerful message. I do think, like, acting is pretty good here, and, like, I definitely was following these two boys and their characters. Like, I wanted to see what would happen on their journey. So I was interested. I wasn't necessarily bored, but I did feel at times that it just was just a little bit too slow. If it could have picked up the pace a little bit more, I do think I would have loved it a little bit more. So as far as the score for this one, I would give it a 3 out of 5. Like I said, it is a good movie. I think it's more so like a one-time watch because, like I said, it is heavy subject material and there is tragedy within this movie. There's positive things to be had from this movie, you know, especially for now, like how we've definitely came a long way, at least from this aspect. But at the same time, like, there is sadness in this movie and there is tragedy. So on that front, it's because it's such a heavy type of subject matter, I just don't think it's a movie that I'd probably revisit. And not because it's not a good movie, it's a little bit tough to really digest, I would say. My wife did watch this with me, and she said that she loved it. She would give it a 5 out of 5. She loved the perspective of, like, the first person point of view. And I like that as well, but I do think it's weird when they kind of change that perspective. So on that front, like, overall, like, I like the movie. 3 out of 5 is what I would give it. I would say definitely check it out once. I will say, if you don't like slow movies, it may not be something you really care for. Because I have watched a couple of reviews and people, they have said that. But then there's other people that really love it as well. So those are all the 4 movies that I watched recently. Let me know in the comments, have you guys watched any of these? If you haven't watched them, are you going to check them out soon? Are you going to watch the Oscars? Definitely let me know down in the comments. Like, who do you want to win Best Picture or any of the categories? Definitely let me know down in the comments. And if you have watched these movies, definitely share your opinions and let me know what you thought about each one of them. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you guys next time.